Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his massive ship, the Void Reaper, looking down at the small blue and green planet below. His red eyes glowed with satisfaction as he watched his scanners showed the tiny human research station on the surface. This station looked pathetic compared to his mighty warship, which was over 2 miles long and packed with enough firepower to destroy entire cities. Vextar had been hunting humans for 3 years, now ever since the Galactic Dominion had declared them a suitable species for slavery. The alien commander found humans to be weak, slow, and incredibly stupid compared to his own people, the Zephyrians, who had conquered dozens of worlds. Across the galaxy, his tall purple-skinned body towered over most other species, and his 4 arms made him twice as deadly in combat as any human warrior. The research station on Kepler 442b was supposed to be studying plant life and atmospheric conditions. Nothing important or dangerous, just boring science. Work that humans seemed to love doing. Vextar's intelligence reports said there were only about 30 humans at the facility, including some families with children, perfect targets for his slave-collecting mission. Lieutenant Krazak approached the commander with the attack plan ready. Sir, we have identified all the weak points in their defenses. The humans have only basic energy shields and no real weapons. Our assault teams can take the facility in less than 10 minutes. Vextar nodded his approval. Launch the attack now. I want as many live prisoners as possible. Dead slaves are worthless to us. The children especially must be captured alive. Young slaves are easier to train and sell for higher prices. The attack began exactly as Vextar had planned. His dropships descended from the cloudy sky like metal vultures carrying 200 of his best warriors. The humans never saw them coming because their primitive radar systems could not detect Zephyrian stealth technology. The first sign of trouble for the research station was when explosions started tearing through their outer walls. Deer Park was working in his laboratory when the alarms started screaming. He grabbed his wife, Dr. Kim, and ran toward the living quarters where their children were supposed to be safe. The couple had been studying alien plant samples for 6 months, hoping to find new medicines that could help people back on Earth. Now their peaceful research mission had turned into a nightmare. Their 12-year-old son Hyan was in the computer lab teaching his 8-year-old sister Nari how to program simple games when the explosions began. The boy immediately understood they were under attack because he had studied military history and recognized the sound of energy weapons. Hyan grabbed his sister's hand and ran toward their friends' room. 10-year-old Tae was practicing martial arts moves in the recreation center when the walls started shaking. The boy had been training in Taekwondo since he was 5 years old, and his reflexes were incredibly fast. He heard people screaming and immediately knew something terrible was happening. Tae ran toward the living area looking for his friends, Hyan and Narith. The 3 children met in the hallway just as Zephyrian warriors began breaking through the main doors. The aliens were 7 feet tall with purple skin for arms and faces that looked like angry lizards. They carried energy rifles that could cut through metal and wore armor that made them look even more frightening. Hyun pushed his sister behind him and whispered to Tae in Korean, "Stay quiet and follow me. I know a hiding place." The 3 children crawled through a maintenance shaft that led to the storage area while the sounds of fighting echoed throughout the building. Adult humans were screaming and energy weapons were firing in every direction from their hiding spot. The children watched through a small window as the battle ended very quickly. The Zephyrian warriors were too strong and too fast for the human researchers. Most of the adults were killed within minutes, but some were captured alive, including Hyan's parents, who were forced to their knees in the main hall where Commander Vextar himself came down to the planet's surface to inspect his victory. He walked through the damaged research station like he owned the place, which he basically did. Now his red eyes scanned the captured humans with disappointment. Most of them were too old to be valuable slaves, and several were injured from the fighting. Where are the children? Vextar demanded from Lieutenant Krazak. Our intelligence said there were young humans at this facility. Children are worth 10 times more than adults in the slave markets there. Lieutenant looked nervous as he reported, "Sir, we have found signs that children were here, but we cannot locate them. Our sensors show 3 small humans are still somewhere in the building, but they seem to be hiding very well." Vextar became angry, and his 4 fists clenched tightly. "Find them immediately. I do not care if you have to tear this place apart piece by piece. Those children are the most valuable part of this entire mission." The alien warriors began searching every room, every closet, and every possible hiding place. The 3 Korean children stayed perfectly still in their hiding spot, barely breathing as heavy footsteps walked past their location several times. Nari was terrified, but her brother Hyan kept whispering reassuring words in Korean telling her they would be okay. After 2 hours of searching, the warriors finally found the maintenance shaft. Tae tried to fight back using his martial arts training, but he was just a 10-year-old boy against fully grown alien soldiers. The 3 children were dragged out of their hiding place and brought before Commander Vextar. Alien Commander looked down at the 3 small humans with disappointment. They were smaller than he had expected, and they looked frightened, which was exactly what he wanted to see. Scared slaves were obedient slaves, and obedient slaves were profitable slaves. "These pathetic little creatures are what caused my warriors so much trouble," Vextar said with disgust. "Put them with the other prisoners and prepare for departure. We have wasted enough time on this insignificant world." Hyan, Nari, and Tae were roughly pushed into a prison cell aboard the Void Reaper along with a few adult survivors including Hyen's parents. The cell was cold, dark, and smelled like fear and despair. Force fields hummed across the entrance, making escape seem impossible. The massive alien ship lifted off from the planet's surface. Commander Vextar felt satisfied with his mission. He had captured 15 human slaves, including 3 valuable children. The adult humans would be sold to mining companies, while the children would go to wealthy alien families who wanted exotic pets. The commander made his way to his private quarters, thinking about the profits this mission would bring him. He never bothered to check on the prisoners again, because in his experience, captured humans always gave up hope very quickly. Children especially would cry for their parents and then become silent and obedient within a few days. What Vextar did not know was that these 3 human children were very different from any prisoners he had captured before. Hyun had inherited his parents' brilliant scientific minds and could understand complex technology just by looking at it. Nari possessed an unusual ability to read people and predict their behavior, while Tae had reflexes and fighting instincts that were far beyond normal for his age. While the adult prisoners sat in despair, wondering if they would ever see Earth again, the 3 children were already studying their captors and planning something that would shock the entire galaxy. They whispered quietly in Korean, making plans that their alien guards could not understand. The mighty Commander Vextar had just made the biggest mistake of his military career. He had captured 3 human children, thinking they would be easy to control, but he was about to learn why humans had survived and thrived on one of the most dangerous planets in known space. These children were not just future humans, they were humans who had not finished growing yet, and that made them incredibly dangerous. The Void Reaper continued its journey through space, carrying what Vextar believed was his greatest victory, but was actually the beginning of his worst nightmare. The first night aboard the Void Reaper was terrible for most of the human prisoners. The adults cried quietly, or sat in stunned silence while the ship traveled through hyperspace toward the slave markets. The prison cell was cold, and the alien food tasted horrible, but the 3 Korean children were not thinking about their discomfort while everyone else was sleeping. Hyun was wide awake, studying everything around him. The 12-year-old boy had always been fascinated by technology, and even in this terrible situation, his curiosity was stronger than his fear. He noticed that the force field keeping them trapped flickered every few minutes in a very specific pattern. The boy began collecting small pieces of metal and plastic that had fallen through the force field during their capture. His parents had taught him about electronics and energy systems, and he was starting to understand how the alien technology worked. The force field generator was old and poorly maintained, which meant it had weaknesses. Nari was pretending to sleep, but she was actually watching the guards very carefully. The 8-year-old girl had always been good at reading people and understanding their emotions. She noticed that the alien guards were bored and lazy. They walked the same route every time and always checked their communication devices at exactly the same moments. The guards were called Zilt and Vrak, and they clearly thought guarding human prisoners was beneath them. Zilt was shorter than most Zephyrians and seemed angry about being given such an unimportant job. Vrak was taller but moved slowly, like he was tired all the time. Neither guard paid much attention to what the prisoners were doing. Tae was also awake, but he was testing his body and practicing his martial arts moves in tiny movements that nobody could see. The 10-year-old boy had discovered that the artificial gravity on the alien ship was slightly different from Earth gravity. Everything felt just a little bit lighter, which meant he could move faster and jump higher than normal. During second day, the 3 children began communicating in whispers using Korean words that the guards could not understand. They shared what they had learned and started making plans that seemed impossible for kids their age to even think about. Hyun had figured out that the ship used a central computer system to control everything from life support to navigation. He explained to his friends that if someone could access the main computer, they could potentially control the entire ship. The problem was that the computer core was heavily guarded and located in the most secure part of the vessel. Nari had mapped out the guard schedules and discovered that there were exactly 17 minutes every 6 hours when the prison area was only watched by cameras. The guards would both leave to eat their meals, and during that time the automated systems were supposed to keep the prisoners contained. But Nari had noticed that the cameras had blind spots near the ceiling. Tae had been studying the ship's structure through vibrations and sounds. He could tell how thick the walls were and where the ventilation shafts were located just by listening carefully. The boy had also realized that most of the aliens aboard the ship were much bigger than humans, which meant they probably could not fit through smaller spaces. On the second night, something strange happened that made the guards nervous. Hayen had managed to create a small electromagnetic device using pieces of scrap metal and some components from a broken food dispenser. When he activated the device, it caused the lights in their cell to flicker and made weird noises in the wall. Zilt came to investigate the disturbance but found nothing wrong. All the prisoners appeared to be sleeping peacefully and there was no sign of any problems. The device Hayen had built was too small for the alien sensors to detect, but it had successfully interfered with the ship's electrical systems for almost 30 seconds. Lieutenant Krozak received reports about electrical anomalies near the prisoner area, but the ship's engineers could not find any problems. The fluctuations were too brief and too small to trigger the main alarm systems. Most of the crew assumed it was just normal wear and tear on an aging warship. What they did not know was that Heian was learning more about their technology. With every test he performed, the boy was essentially reverse engineering alien electronics, using nothing but scraps and his incredible intelligence. Each small experiment taught him something new about how their systems worked. Nari had begun studying the alien psychology by watching how they reacted. Two different situations, she noticed that Zephyrians became uncomfortable when humans stared directly at them, and they seemed to have poor hearing compared to humans. The guards also appeared to have difficulty seeing in low-light conditions. Girl started testing these observations by making small noises when the lights were dimmed or by positioning herself where the guards would have to look directly at her. The results confirmed her theories about alien weaknesses that could potentially be exploited. Later, Tay discovered that the ventilation system connected to their cell was larger than it appeared. The air shafts were designed for maintenance robots, but a small human child could probably crawl through them. If necessary, he also found that certain war panels were not as secure as they looked and could be removed with the right tools. Commander Vextar remained completely unaware of what was happening in the prison area. He spent his time planning how to spend the profits from selling his human slaves and dreaming about his next promotion. The alien commander was so confident in his ship's security that he never bothered to check on the prisoners. Personally, on the third day, Dr. Park tried to talk to his son about staying strong and not giving up hope, but Heian just smiled and whispered back that everything would be okay. The boy could not explain his plans to his father because the guards might overhear, but he wanted his parents to know that he was not helpless. The adult prisoners were becoming more depressed as each day passed, but the three children seemed almost energetic. They whispered constantly in Korean, and sometimes one of them would smile like they knew a secret. The adults thought the children were just trying to stay brave, but the truth was much more incredible. By the end of the third day, Hoon had completed his analysis of the ship's power distribution system. Nari had memorized every detail of the guard routines and camera positions. Tay had mapped out 3 different escape routes through the ventilation system. The 3 friends had transformed from scared prisoners into a highly organized team of saboteurs. At night, as the ship entered its sleep cycle, the children put the final touches on their escape plan. They had identified exactly when and how they would break out of their cell, disable the security systems, and begin their campaign to take control of the alien warship guard. Zilt noticed that the human children seemed unusually quiet that evening, but he assumed they were finally accepting their fate as slaves. What he did not realize was that the 3 kids were conserving their energy for the most daring escape attempt in galactic history. Vextar went to sleep that night believing his ship was secure and his prisoners were helpless. But in the darkness of the prison cell, 3 human children were preparing to teach the entire galaxy why humans were the most dangerous species in known space. The alien commander was about to learn that capturing human children was the biggest mistake he could possibly make. The countdown to chaos had begun, and nothing would ever be the same aboard the Void Reaper. The 4th night aboard the Void Reaper started like any other night, but it would end with Commander Vextar questioning everything he believed about human children. At exactly 0300 ship time, when the corridors were darkest and most of the crew was sleeping, the 3 Korean children put their carefully planned escape into action. Had spent 3 days building his electromagnetic pulse device. Using scraps of metal, torn fabric from their clothes, and components salvaged from the broken food dispenser, the device was no bigger than his fist, but it contained enough power to disrupt the ship's electrical systems for several crucial minutes. The boy had calculated the exact moment when the ship's power grid would be most vulnerable, had memorized every detail of the guard schedules, and knew that between 0300 and 0317 hours only 1 guard would be watching their section. The cameras would be on automatic mode, and the backup power systems would take at least 5 minutes to fully activate after any electrical disruption. Her timing had to be perfect. They had been stretching and exercising in tiny movements for days, preparing his body for what was about to happen. The boy knew he would have only seconds to disable the guard, and even with his martial arts training, he was still just a 10-year-old child fighting a 7-foot-tall alien warrior. The plan began when the force field flickered, just like it had done hundreds of times over the past 3 days, but this time Nari was ready. She slipped Hein's electromagnetic device through the small gap at the bottom of the force field and positioned it exactly where the boy had told her to place it. Hein counted down silently in Korean and activated his device, using a makeshift remote control he had built from a broken communicator. The electromagnetic pulse shot through the ship's electrical systems like invisible lightning, causing power fluctuations throughout the entire prison section. Emergency lights began flashing red and backup alarms started wailing, but the main power grid was down. Emergency systems struggled to compensate for the sudden power drain, and several security protocols went offline. The force field keeping the children trapped flickered wildly and then disappeared completely. Guard Vrak came running down the corridor to investigate the electrical failure, but he never saw Tay waiting in the shadows beside the cell entrance. The 10-year-old boy moved faster than any human child should have been able to move, using the ship's lighter gravity to enhance his natural speed and agility. Tay struck specific pressure points on the alien's neck and wrist, just like his martial arts instructor had taught him back on Earth. The massive Zephyrian warrior collapsed unconscious before he could even cry for help. The boy quickly grabbed the guard's weapon and communication device, then signaled to his friends that the way was clear. The three children moved through the darkened corridors like ghosts. Their small size allowed them to hide in shadows and move through spaces that adult aliens could never access. Hyun led them directly toward the ship's computer core using maps he had memorized from studying the vessel's electrical systems. They crawled through maintenance shafts that were filled with pipes, cables, and mechanical systems. The tunnels were hot, noisy, and barely large enough for children, but they provided a secret highway through the ship that bypassed all the security checkpoints and guard posts. Nari used her understanding of alien psychology to predict which corridors would be empty and which areas the crew would search first. When they discovered the escape, she guided her friends away from danger, using hand signals and whispered warnings in Korean. When they reached the computer core, Haeon immediately went to work on the main terminal. The boy had been thinking about this moment for 3 days, and he knew exactly what he needed to do. His fingers moved across the alien keyboard like he had been using this technology his entire life. The virus Haeon planted in the ship's computer system was a masterpiece of simple but effective sabotage. It would gradually degrade navigation systems, make weapons targeting wildly inaccurate, and cause life support failures throughout the ship. But it would do all of this slowly over several hours, so the crew would think they were experiencing random equipment problems while Haeon worked on the computer. Nari and Tae began the second phase of their plan. They split up to sabotage different systems throughout the ship using information Hyun had gathered about the vessel's layout and critical components. Nari went to the food processing center, where she contaminated the crew's meal supply with compounds that would make them sick to their stomachs. The chemicals were not dangerous, but they would cause nausea, diarrhea, and terrible headaches that would make the aliens miserable and unable to fight effectively. Tae targeted the ship's communication systems and weapons control centers. He used his small size to access control panels that were supposedly secure and planted tiny devices that would cause major malfunctions. He also damaged several important cables and circuit boards using techniques Haeon had taught him. The three children worked with incredible efficiency and coordination. Each of them knew their job perfectly, and they communicated using hand signals they had developed. During their days of planning, every move was calculated to cause maximum damage while avoiding detection for as long as possible. By 500 hours, they had completed their sabotage mission and returned to the prison area, but instead of going back to their cell, they freed all the adult prisoners, including Hyun's parents. The force fields were still down because of the continuing power problems, and the adults could hardly believe what was happening. Do Park stared at his son in amazement as the 12-year-old boy explained how they had escaped and sabotaged the ship. The adult prisoners had been preparing to die as slaves, but now they found themselves free, and their captors were the ones in trouble. The freed humans quickly armed themselves with weapons taken from unconscious guards and began taking control of different sections of the ship. The adults were amazed by how much the three children had accomplished, but they were also experienced scientists and engineers who knew how to use the advantages the kids had created. Commander Vextar woke up to the sound of alarms blaring throughout his ship. His first thought was that they were experiencing technical difficulties, which happened sometimes on older vessels. But when he tried to contact the bridge, he discovered that his communication systems were not working properly. The alien commander stumbled toward the bridge in his sleeping robes, wondering why his crew had not already fixed whatever problems they were having. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed that many systems were malfunctioning and several of his warriors were bent over with stomach cramps. When Vextar finally reached the bridge, he found his officers in chaos. Navigation was showing impossible readings, weapons targeting was completely offline, and life support was failing in multiple sections. Lieutenant Krazak was trying to coordinate repairs, but nothing seemed to be working properly. "Sir, we are experiencing massive system failures throughout the ship," Krazak reported. "The problems started about 2 hours ago, and they seem to be getting worse. Our engineers cannot identify the source of the malfunctions." Vextar was about to demand answers when another alarm began sounding. This one was different from the technical failure warnings. It was the prisoner escape alarm that meant the humans had somehow broken out of their cells. The alien commander felt his blood turn cold as he realized what was really happening. "Check the detention area immediately," he ordered, but deep down he already knew what his warriors would find. The empty cells confirmed his worst fears. Somehow, impossibly, 3 human children had not only escaped but had been systematically destroying his ship from the inside. The mighty Commander Vextar suddenly understood that he was no longer the hunter, he had become the prey. Commander Vextar stood on his bridge, watching his mighty warship fall apart around him. Systems that had worked perfectly for decades were now failing one by one, and his crew was getting sicker by the hour. The alien commander had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved thousands of beings, but he had never faced anything like this. The ship-wide search for the 3 human children had been going on for 6 hours, and his warriors had found nothing. The kids seemed to vanish into thin air every time his soldiers got close to them. Vextar had deployed over 100 of his best fighters, but they were being outmaneuvered by children who were barely half their size. Lieutenant Krazak approached the commander with another report of failure. "Sir, our search teams have covered every corridor, every room, and every possible hiding place, but the human children are nowhere to be found. It's like they can predict our every move." Vextar slammed his 4 fists on the command console, making the metal bend under the impact. "How is it possible that 3 small humans are defeating my entire crew?" he roared at his officers. "These are supposed to be primitive creatures with no technology and no military training." What the alien commander did not understand was that the 3 children were not just hiding from his forces, they were actively hunting his warriors using the ship's own systems against them. Hune had turned the surveillance network into his personal weapon, creating false readings and phantom contacts that sent search parties running in circles. The 12-year-old boy was watching every move the aliens made from the security control room. He had learned to operate their monitoring systems better than their own technicians could, and he was using this knowledge to stay 3 steps ahead of every search party. Nari was using her understanding of alien psychology to predict exactly where the warriors would look next. She had studied their search patterns and realized that Zephyrians thought in very straight lines. They always searched the obvious places first, and had trouble thinking creatively about where small humans might hide. Tay was the most active of the 3 children, moving through the ventilation system. Like a deadly shadow, he had already disabled 15 guards using his martial arts skills and stolen their weapons. The boy was operating on a completely different level than any 10-year-old should have been capable of. The 3 friends communicated using a combination of Korean whispers and hand signals they had developed during their imprisonment. They moved through the ship like they had been born there, using maintenance tunnels, service corridors, and even garbage chutes to avoid detection. Few hours they would strike at a different target. Hune would plant another virus in a computer system. Nari would sabotage life support in another section, and Tay would disable more guards. The cumulative effect was turning the Void Reaper into a floating disaster. The adult human prisoners were also contributing to the chaos now that they had been freed. Dr. Park and the other scientists were using their knowledge to identify critical systems that could be damaged. Dr. Kim had found the main power distribution center and was systematically overloading circuits throughout the ship. The freed humans had armed themselves with alien weapons and were fighting back against their former captors, but they were following the children's lead, letting Hayon, Nari, and Tay coordinate the overall strategy while the adults provided backup and support. Commander Vextar was beginning to understand that he was facing something unprecedented in galactic history. Human children were not supposed to be capable of this level of strategic thinking and tactical execution, yet somehow 3 kids had turned his ship into a war zone where he was losing badly. The breaking point came when Hayon managed to access the ship's external communication array and broadcast a distress signal. The message was transmitted on multiple frequencies in perfect galactic standard language, identifying the Void Reaper as a slave ship carrying captured humans. The signal was picked up by a human patrol fleet that had been searching for the missing research station. Captain Lee of the Earth Defense Force ship Rising Phoenix immediately changed course and began traveling toward the coordinates at maximum speed. Vextar watched his tactical display with growing horror as 3 human warships appeared on his sensors. They were still several hours away, but they were approaching fast, and his own ship was in no condition to fight. The weapon systems were offline. The shields were failing, and half his crew was too sick to stand. "Sir, we need to retreat immediately," Lieutenant Krazak suggested. "Our ship cannot survive a battle with human forces in its current condition. We should abandon the prisoners and flee to friendly space." But Vextar knew that running away would end his military career and probably get him executed by the Galactic Dominion for losing a valuable warship. He had to find those children and regain control of his vessel before the human fleet arrived. At the alien commander ordered his remaining healthy warriors to fall back to the most secure areas of the ship and establish defensive positions. He activated emergency lockdown protocols that sealed off the bridge and other critical areas, hoping to limit the damage the humans could cause. What Vextar did not realize was that the lockdown was actually helping the children by trapping his forces in predictable locations. Hayon quickly hacked into the security system and began systematically cutting off life support. 2 of the areas where the aliens were hiding, the Zephyrian warriors found themselves trapped in rooms that were getting hotter and harder to breathe in, while the humans controlled the corridors and could move freely throughout most of the ship. The hunters had definitely become the hunted. Nari had been studying the alien command structure and realized that if they could capture Commander Vextar himself, they could force the entire crew to surrender. She explained her plan to Hune and Tay, who immediately understood the genius of targeting the enemy leader. 3 children began working their way toward the bridge using a combination of stealth, sabotage, and misdirection. They created diversions in other parts of the ship to draw attention away from their real objective while systematically disabling the defenses protecting the command center. Tay discovered that the bridge had an emergency ventilation system that connected to the main air recycling plant. The shaft was too small for adult aliens but perfectly sized for a determined 10-year-old boy with martial arts training. The human rescue fleet grew closer on the tactical display. Commander Vextar realized that his situation was hopeless. His ship was falling apart. His crew was defeated, and 3 human children had accomplished something that entire alien armies had failed to do. The Alien commander who had started this mission believing humans were weak and stupid was about to learn the most important lesson of his life: never underestimate human children because they are just humans who have not finished growing yet. The final confrontation was approaching and Commander Vexstar was no longer confident about who would win. The human rescue fleet arrived at the Void Reaper exactly 8 hours after receiving the distress signal that Hyun had broadcast. Captain Lee of the Earth Defense Force ship Rising Phoenix stared at her tactical display in amazement. The alien warship was drifting in space with systems failing throughout the vessel and appeared to be completely helpless. Captain Lee opened communication channels and broadcast. On all frequencies, alien vessel, this is Captain Lee of the Earth Defense Force. You are ordered to immediately release all human prisoners and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with deadly force on the bridge of the Void Reaper. Commander Vexstar listened to the human demands with a mixture of rage and desperation. His mighty ship was falling apart around him, half his crew was sick or unconscious, and he had lost complete control of the situation. The 3 human children had turned his vessel into a floating disaster before Vexstar could respond to the human fleet. His bridge doors suddenly opened, revealing something that shocked him more than anything else in his military career. 3 small human children walked calmly onto his command center carrying alien weapons and looking completely unafraid. Year-old Hyun stepped forward and spoke in perfect galactic standard language. Commander Vexstar, I am Hyun and these are my friends Nari and Tae. We are here to accept your surrender. The alien commander stared at the children in complete disbelief. These were the enemies who had defeated his entire ship, 3 kids who looked like they should be playing games or studying in school instead of conducting military operations against a galactic warship. You are just children, Vexstar whispered, his voice shaking with shock. How is this possible? How did you do all of this? Hyun smiled calmly and replied, We are human children, Commander. There is a very big difference. Human children are not weak or helpless. We are humans who have not finished growing yet, and humans never give up when someone tries to hurt our families. Nari stepped forward and added in her 8-year-old voice, You made a mistake when you killed our friends and captured our parents. You thought we would be scared and helpless, but human children become very dangerous when you threaten the people we love. Tae moved to cover the bridge exits with his stolen alien rifle. The 10-year-old boy looked completely comfortable handling the advanced weapon. His martial arts training and enhanced reflexes made him as deadly as any adult warrior. Lieutenant Krazak tried to draw his sidearm, but Tae was faster. The boy disabled the alien officer with a precise strike to his nerve center before he could even clear his holster. The other bridge crew members froze, realizing they were completely outmatched. Commander Vexstar activated his personal communicator and spoke to Captain Lee on the human flagship. Human Commander, this is Vexstar. I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender. Your people have taken control of my ship and I have no choice but to negotiate. Captain Lee responded immediately. Commander Vexstar, you will release all human prisoners without conditions. Your crew will be taken into custody, and your ship will be impounded as evidence of war crimes. There are no negotiations. The alien commander looked around his bridge at the 3 children who had accomplished the impossible. They had not only escaped from his prison but had completely defeated a warship with over 300 trained warriors, using nothing but their intelligence, courage, and determination. Park and Dr. Kim entered the bridge, along with the other freed adult prisoners. The parents ran to their son Hyun and hugged him tightly, tears streaming down their faces. They could hardly believe what their 12-year-old boy had accomplished. We knew you were smart, Dr. Park whispered to his son, but we never imagined you could do something like this. You saved all of Husian hugged his parents back and said, I had help from my friends. We did this together. Nobody could have succeeded alone. Nari was reunited with her family while Tae was embraced by the other research station survivors who had become like family. To him, the 3 children had not only saved themselves but had rescued everyone who had been captured by the alien slave raiders. Captain Lee and her security team boarded the Void Reaper to take custody of the alien crew and free the human prisoners. When she met the 3 children, she could hardly believe what she was seeing. You 3 kids managed to capture an entire Zephyrian warship, she said with amazement. How did you possibly accomplish something like this? Hyun answered for his friends. Captain, we studied our enemies and found their weaknesses. We used their own technology against them and we never gave up hope. We knew that other humans would come to rescue us. We just had to survive long enough. The boarding operation was completed. Without any resistance from the remaining alien crew, the Zephyrians were too demoralized and sick to fight back against the human marines who secured the ship. The adult prisoners were evacuated first, followed by the 3 young heroes as the last shuttle prepared to leave the Void Reaper. Commander Vexstar asked Captain Lee a question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. How is it possible that 3 of your younglings defeated my entire ship and crew? Captain Lee looked at Nari and Tae, who were sitting together sharing a meal and talking quietly in Korean. She smiled as she answered, Commander Vexstar, you made the fundamental error that most aliens make about humans. You assume that human children are weak and helpless, but human children are not a different species from adult humans, she continued. They are the same species, just at an earlier stage of development. They have the same intelligence, the same creativity, the same determination, and the same refusal to give up that makes adult humans so dangerous. The captain paused and looked directly at the defeated alien commander. You captured 3 human children thinking they would be easy to control, but what you actually captured were 3 humans who had not finished growing yet, and there is nothing more dangerous in the entire galaxy than a human who has been backed into a corner. The Void Reaper was towed back to Earth's space as evidence while its crew faced trial for crimes against humanity. The 3 Korean children became heroes throughout human civilization, their story inspiring countless others and serving as a warning to any alien species that might consider humans easy targets. Hyen, Nari and Tay returned to normal lives, but they had changed the galaxy forever. Their incredible escape and victory proved that human children were not just the future of their species. They were a force to be reckoned with in the present. The story of 3 kids who defeated an alien warship spread throughout known space, becoming legend among both humans and aliens. Most importantly, it established a new rule that every species in the galaxy came to understand. Never underestimate human children, because they are not helpless victims waiting to grow up. They are humans who simply have not finished becoming everything they are capable of being yet.